saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhampi. I apologize. Tatiyampi buddhang saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Isaranagamanaং nititang.
Amabante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Anatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kāmesu micchāchārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya maja pamadatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani sīlena sugating yanti, sīlena bhoga sampada, sīlena nibbutiṃ yanti, tasmā sīlaṃ visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. Okay, so we are currently on Chapter 2, the Great Discourse on the Wheel of Dhamma. And just a quick recap what happened thus far. And what happened is that the Buddha is currently in Isipatana, the deer park of what is known today as Varanasi or Benares, and is seated in front of the 5 bhikkhus. And now he's beginning with the discourse, or he is in the middle of the beginning of the discourse of turning the wheel of Dhamma, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So we are not many readers today, but we can still start from the bottom. So I will post it in the Discord chat. And we would start with you today, Sanda, if that's okay.
Chapter 2 The Great Discourse on the Wheel of Dhamma, Part 2, delivered on the sixth waxing of Tadingyut, 1324 ME. This discourse was delivered by us beginning on the new moon of Thalin. The introduction, the discourse had taken most of our time there. we could deal only with the opening lines of the sutta. Today, we will pick up from the thread from there. Dhamma bhikkhave anta pavajitena na sevitaba. Because one who has gone forth from the worldly life should not indulge in these two extreme parts, things, practices, which will be presently explained.
Pabajitena is one word, so it means by one who has gone forth. Pabajita is one who has undergone pabaja, which in Buddhism translates into becoming a novice. So, I mean, generally speaking, anyone who leaves the home life is called a pabajita, but in Buddhism it also has a specific meaning referring to becoming a novice. When you become a novice, you gain the pabaja. That's reflected in the words that you speak when you request it. So that's the shift from becoming a layperson, from going from a layperson to being a recluse or a Buddhist monastic. And then becoming a monk is called upasampada. Means literally something like acceptance or going up, a promotion kind of thing is the idea. Becoming complete. A promotion. When you go from becoming a novice to a full bhikkhu or bhikkhuni. So here he's talking to these 5 ascetics who are obviously they're not yet Buddhist monks. He's calling them bhikkhus, which is interesting. He does seem to give that word a wider meaning than just someone who is technically ordained. Usually not. I mean, usually that word is reserved for those who are ordained. But he also says ehi bhikkhu, come bhikkhu, and that's considered an ordination. He said that, he stopped saying that after a while, but early on the way of ordination was to say ehi bhikkhu, come bhikkhu. And then they would be a Buddhist monastic. And of course it evolved over time as it grew, but calls them bhikkhus, and then he just says anyone who has gone forth, because this is a new doctrine, this is an important change, as I've said, from the general consensus that one who has left home shouldn't engage in sensual, engage in the pursuit of sensual pleasure. But the Buddha said, there's more to it than that. That's true, but one should also not indulge in torture, which was commonly thought to be the right practice to cleanse oneself from craving and greed and lust and desire.
Bhante, maybe because it was such a special occasion, and these were the 5 first ascetics or people who heard the teaching, it was, and the Buddha already knew in his mind, I think that these were receptive for enlightenment. That was like automatically an ordination. Once he gave them the speech, once they were ready to listen to him.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know the technical the orthodox statement on their ordination. It is interesting. I can't actually remember if I've ever read anywhere where it technically said when they ordained. It may be in this statement. This statement might be their ordination. I'm not sure.
Sanda, you can go ahead and read 2 more paragraphs since it wasn't very much.
And why shouldn't he indulge in this? Because the main purpose of one who has gone forth from the worldly life is to rid himself of such defilements as lust and anger. This objective could not be achieved by indulging in the two extreme things, for they will only tend to promote further accumulations of lust and anger. What are the two extreme things, parts, practices? Delighting in desirable sense objects, pursuing and enjoying sensuous pleasures constitute one extreme practice. This practice is low, vulgar, being the habit of village and town folks, indulged in by ordinary common worldlings, not pursued by the noble ones, ignoble, unclean, not tending to the true interests one is seeking after. Such pursuit after sensuous pleasures is an extreme part practice which should be avoided.
Okay, so to be clear, this isn't their ordination. There is a statement which makes much more sense. Right at the end of this sutta, which is, I think, not going to be discussed in this book, but in the Vinaya Pitaka, and after the sutta ends, it says the next paragraph is that Undanya asks the Buddha for ordination. Labbayang, and it's the very statement that we still use today. Labbayahang bande bhagavato san. Oh, no, that's not. It's different, because this is the translation here is in front of the Buddha. May you give me the ordination, give me the going forth, give me the higher ordination. But we change it nowadays because, of course, it's not in front of the Buddha. Labbayaham bande tassa Labbayaham bande tassa bhagavato Dhamma Vinaya. In the Dhamma, so nowadays we say in the Dhamma Vinaya of that blessed one, instead of here in front of the blessed one. Because, of course, the Buddha is not in front of us. And then the Buddha says, Ehi bhikkhu, which is the ordination. Ehi bhikkhu, the longer version is, Ehi bhikkhu swakato dhammo jara brahmacharyang samadukasa anta kiryaya savatasa ayasmato upasampada hosi. That was his ordination. So the translation is, come bhikkhu, well taught is this Dhamma, or well swakato, well spoken, well preached, I guess. Well spoken is well taught is the Dhamma, well preached is the Dhamma. Live the brahmacharya, live the holy life for the making an end, for the right making an end of dukkha, samma dukkasa antakiryaya. That's the full ordination that the Buddha pronounced. It's the statement that he would pronounce as an ordination for telling one to come bhikkhu, ehi bhikkhu, swakato dhammo jara brahmacharyang samadukkasa antakiryaya. For the rest of them, okay, so after the other ones practiced under the Buddha, after this sutta is finished and they practiced, and each one of them became a sotapanna, they asked as a group, Labbayama mayang bante bhagavato santike babajang. May we obtain the going forth in the presence of the Buddha. And then instead of ehi bhikkhu, he says eta bhikkhavo. which is just the plural form. Come bhikkhus, which I hadn't heard before, or I hadn't remembered before. This is not something you hear. You always hear about the ehi bhikkhu, but not the eta bhikkhu, which is just the plural form. Anyway, it means the same thing.
Thank you for the clarification, Bhante.
So him calling them bhikkhus in advance is actually interesting, and I mean, cynically, it's the format, it's the template of all suttas, where the Buddha starts his sutta off by saying "Dve me bhikkhave," this or that. If you read throughout the Sutta Pitaka, it's all like that. It's all, there are these two O bhikkhus. So it's just the way that the suttas start. Whether that means that this was, you could argue that it was edited later, doesn't, I mean, there's nothing to suggest that, but it's you just as likely could say that the Buddha just used the word bhikkhu broadly.
There are 5 kinds of desirable sense objects, namely pleasurable sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. In brief, all the material objects, animate or inanimate, enjoyed by people in the world. Seeing a seemingly pleasurable sight and enjoying it constitute practice and pursuit of sensuality. Here the sense object of sight means not merely a source of light or color that comes into contact with the seeing eye, but the man or woman or the whole of the object that forms the source or origin of that sight. Similarly, all sources of sound, smell, and touch, whether man, woman, or instrumental objects, constitute sensuous objects. As regards taste, not only the various foods, fruits, and delicacies, but also men, women, and people who prepare and serve them are classified as objects of taste. Listening to a pleasant sound, smelling a sweet, fragrant smell are as sensuous as enjoyment of good, delicious food, the luxury or a comfortable bed, or physical contact with opposite sex.
Sensuous gratification is base and vulgar. Delighting in sensuous pleasures and relishing them is to be regarded as vulgar practice because such enjoyments lead to formation of base desires, which are clinging and lustful. It tends to promote self-conceit with the thought that no one else is in a position to enjoy such pleasures. At the same time, one becomes oppressed with thoughts of avarice, not wishing to share the good fortune with others, or overcome by thoughts of jealousy, envy, anxious to deny similar pleasures to others. It arouses ill will towards those who are thought to be opposed to oneself. Flushed with success and affluence, one becomes shameless and unscrupulous, bold and reckless in one's behavior, no longer afraid to do evils. One begins to deceive oneself with false impression, maha, of well-being and prosperity. The new informed worldling, puthujana, may also come to hold the wrong view of living soul or atta, to entertain disbelief in the resultant effects of one's own actions, kamma. Such being the outcome of delighting in and relishing of sensuous pleasures, they are to be regarded as low and base.
So he's going off the Dhamma, the principle that not just being productive of more and endless and unsatiable desire also has the potential to give to breed the many other defilements, conceit, anger in its many forms. He mentions a couple, that which are avarice, like selfishness, when you jealousy and so on. These are all anger based, where you feel cruel and you want to deny other people good things or things that you think are good. And ill will, ill will can be not just towards those who try to take things from you, but ill will towards those things that are dissimilar from the things that you want, that encroach upon your or contrast the things that you desire. So when someone is interrupting you from enjoying your pleasures, not just when they want to take them for themselves, but someone bothers you, you're much more likely to be annoyed. When you're not able to engage in sensual desire, you'll become bored, and boredom is another anger-based state of mind. So many kinds of anger. And then he also mentions views. Wrong views come about as a result, at least at the very basic level, from the pollution of the mind. The mind is clouded. So without any direction, craving and desire is a strong breeding ground for wrong view. Wrong views can often simply be based on the clouded state of mind that comes from greed and anger, but also they can be from the bias. So you start to believe things because you're biased to believe them. For example, ideas about heaven and religion, which come from our defilements. So people cling to God, sometimes just based on or starting from craving, starting from fear, starting from anger, these kinds of biases into wrong view. So they're base and low, not just because of how silly they are and how consuming they are, which is the main reason, really. That craving just has no end. It's all consuming, but also they just lead to so much of the fire and fever and chaos, the evil in the world, the degradation of the environment, the degradation of society, degradation of mental clarity, honesty, and harmony. All of these things are disturbed, disrupted, are destroyed, torn down by the ending pursuit of sensual pleasure. So, in other words, it also corrupts society. So it makes society low and base. This is usually taught as being low in terms of having gone forth is up here, and living in the home life is down here. So it's low. It's the way of these people who are not interested in spirituality. But another way of describing that is that the reason why this is considered low is not because you're not a monk, so you're low. It's that because you engage in sensual pleasure, you pollute everything. You ruin everything, and society becomes ruined. Human society isn't low simply because it is human society. It's low because of what we have done to it. So our worldly life is low and base because of the desires that make it such a tumultuous and chaotic and disharmonious environment, which ideally is in contrast to a monastic environment, a Buddhist environment where people are practicing spirituality, which is ideally, or generally speaking, more harmonious. By far, really. I mean, it really is true that generally speaking, Buddhist monasteries, no matter what problems they may have, are far more harmonious than ordinary society. So for that reason, considered higher. And it's directly because of a dedication to the Dhamma over the wanton abandoning oneself to desires and the other defilements.
Bhante, would you say pursuit is maybe almost a mild way of putting it? And you could say obsession after sensuous pleasures, or just running after them constantly, which is, I think, often the case among ordinary people.
Any kind of pursuit is a part of this practice that he's condemning. Doesn't matter how mild it is.
Yes, but to some extent, everyone has to pursue sensuous pleasures. I mean, for example, for food, you have to, do something to get
That's
food.
not the pursuit of sensual pleasures. That's the pursuit of food. Sensual pleasure is tastes. If you're pursuing tastes, then you're pursuing sensual pleasures.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Furthermore, indulgence in sensual pleasures is the habitual practice of lower forms of creatures, such as animals, petas, etc. The bhikkhus and samanas belonging to the higher stages of existences should not stoop low to view the lower forms of life in the vulgar practice of base sensuality. Pursuit after sensuous pleasures does not lie within the province of one who has gone forth from the worldly life. It is the concern of the town and village folks who regard sensual pleasures as the highest attributes of bliss. The greater the pleasures, the greater the happiness. In ancient times, rulers and rich people engaged themselves in the pursuit of sensual pleasures. Wars were waged and violent conquests made, all for the gratification of sense desire.
Even today. In ancient times is here he's going to say in modern times as well. Even in ancient times, but also, of course, even today, 60 years after this discourse was taught by Mahasi Sayadaw, nothing's changed. I wrote an article about, did I write this for? I wrote a paper for a final year peace studies class on causes of war. I think we were all supposed to write on the causes of, or no, the course was called The Causes of War. So I got permission to write it from a Buddhist perspective, how the causes of war are greed, anger, and delusion. So I broke it up into 3 parts, and I looked at each one individually: greed, anger, and delusion, and showed how, with historical examples and teachings from the ancient Greeks and that sort of thing, it was in stage by stage, step by step, looking at how an argument could be made that each of these 3 are a way of describing what are the true causes of war. So wars can be caused by greed, anger, delusion, usually, of course, all 3, but we have glaring examples of how wars are caused by one or the other. Some wars are far more influenced by one than the other.
Bhante, there's a question in the chat. It seems relevant to the text, so I'm going to ask it. But is it more harmonious because of people with less desires, or because monastic life doesn't provide people with subsistence? People in regular society provide for the monks, so monks don't have to concern too much about that, no?
Well, there's something there, but it's not really, I would say it's not anywhere near as important, as significant as the pursuit of sensual pleasure. So that being said, obviously some people living in worldly society can and do keep to a life that is free from the pursuit of sensual pleasures to a great degree, often to a degree equal to or even greater than most monks. But generally speaking, I mean, most humans in societies, even in Buddhist societies, don't provide for subsistence for monks. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the reason why societies tend to be chaotic and low and base. The reason for society being low and base is very much because of the pursuit of sensual pleasure. So I mean, the truth in what you're saying is that monks are in a good position to free themselves from sensual desire, sensual pleasure, or the pursuit of sensual pleasure, because they don't have to think about those things so much. But I mean, if a monk prays for this food or that food, which they often do, they're still not free from those desires and pleasures, or this our pursuit of pleasure.
I think you're next again, Julie. Oh, wait, no. Sanda, sorry.
In modern times, too, similar conquests are still being made in some areas for the same objectives. But it is not only the rulers and the rich who seek sensual pleasures. The poor are also arduous in the pursuit of worldly goods and pleasures. As a matter of fact, as soon as adolescence is reached, the instinct for mating and sexual gratification makes itself felt. For the worldly householder, veiled from the Buddha Dhamma, gratification of sense desires appears to be indeed the acme of happiness and bliss. Ditthidhamma Nibbana Vada. Even before the time of the Buddha, there were people who held the belief that heavenly bliss could be enjoyed in this very life. Ditthidhamma Nibbana Vada, according to them, sensual pleasure was indeed blissful. There was nothing to surpass it, and that pleasure was to be enjoyed in this very life. It would be foolish to let precious moments for enjoyment pass, waiting for bliss in future life which does not exist. The time for full gratification of sensual pleasure is now this very life. Such is the Ditthidhamma Nibbana Vada, heavenly bliss in this very life. This is one of the 62 wrong views, Micchaditthi, expounded by the Buddha in the Brahmajala Sutta of Silakanda in the Digha Nikaya.
So the Ditta Dhamma Nibbana, the idea is that Nibbana is something, Nibbana or the ultimate, the final goal is something that is Ditta Dhamma. Ditta Dhamma means visible reality, literally means. But Ditta Dhamma is a word they use to mean in the here and now, which we would say in English. So it means you don't have to wait to the future, and it's not something apart from this, it's something here and now. The goal of life is here and now is one view, and this is a view that we find YOLO, you only live once, or carpe diem. Carpe diem is that philosophy, seize the day. Carpe diem as a principle isn't bad. Buddhists would say as well, do seize the day. And the goal is in the present. To some extent, Ditta Dhamma Nibbana is, as an idea, isn't wrong. But the implication of the word Ditta Dhamma Nibbana means you don't have to work for it. It's already here. It's right in front of you. It's that food. That food is your Nibbana, is the idea. That food is your ultimate goal. Sensual pleasure, which is here, that you don't have to work for.
Thus, enjoyment of sensual pleasure is the preoccupation of town and village people, not the concern of the recluses and bhikkhus. For them to go after sense desire would mean reverting back to the worldly life which they have renounced. People show great reverence to them, believing they are leading a holy life, undisturbed by worldly distraction or allurements of opposite sex. People make the best offer of food and clothing to the recluses, denying these to themselves, often at the sacrifice of the needs of their dear ones and their family. It would be most improper for the bhikkhus to seek worldly pleasures, just like the householders, while living on the charity of the people.
This is such a good reminder. For example, when I did my retreat 2 years ago or something, to remember that you're able to do that because of donations, and this also helps with your resolve to be diligent, even though this is more related to monks and nuns.
Yeah, it's the application of the principle. Why are our courses always free? Why we? I mean, it's not even an argument at this point that we have to discuss. I mean, it's not that we need a reason. It seems self-evident that of course our courses are free, but not all meditation and religious courses or instruction is free. There's often an expectation of payment, but a big and one of the main reasons for dismissing the idea, not just, I mean, it's not that we don't need support, it's that it changes the tone. It's a whole different perception, whole different idea to have a transactional outlook, transactional system where you charge for giving Dhamma. When you don't charge for giving Dhamma, then there's this humbling where people who come are sincere and don't have expectations and appreciate that this is given to them for free. So greater appreciation is the real visible fruit of not charging. So, I mean, the default is to not charge for something. Obviously, the problem is when you start to say, "Hey, this is going to cost you," then you've introduced something extra. You've introduced this expectation of receiving a product. Yeah, it's the same principle as why monks give up. They give up the pursuit and the accumulation of wealth. Puts them in the situation where they're only able to receive that which is given out of faith and confidence and appreciation for them. Puts them in a position to have to be serious about what they're doing.
In addition, bhikkhus renounce the world with a vow to work for release from the sufferings inherent in the rounds of rebirth and for the realization of nibbana. It is obvious that these noble ideas cannot be attained by the bhikkhus if they go after sensual pleasures in the manner of householders. Thus, one who has gone forth from the worldly life should not indulge in delightful sensuous pleasures.
A low common practice. Majority of people in the world are ordinary common folk engaged only in seeking the means of living and enjoying sensuous pleasures. There are only a few who can rise above the common crowd, who can see the Dhamma and live a holy life. It is not for them to indulge in coarse, worldly pleasures, which is the main concern of the lower class of beings. Not the practice of the noble ones. Enjoyment of worldly pleasures is not the practice of the noble ones, Aryas. One may ask here why the Aryas like Visakha, Anathapindaka, and the Sakka, the king of the celestial beings, who had already reached the first stage of noble life, Sotapanna, engaged themselves in pursuit of sensual pleasures. In Sotapannas, lust and passions are not yet overcome. There still lingers in them the incipient perception of agreeableness of camel pleasures, sukha sanya.
Eternal.
Okay. This point is illustrated in Anguttara by the example of a person who is fastidious in the habits of cleanliness, seeking shelter in a filthy place, filled with excrement to avoid attack by an elephant and must. Okay. This defiling, coarse habit, being ignoble and unclean, should be avoided by recluses and bhikkhus. Bante, what was the word you corrected me?
Carnal, meaning of the body, of the physical, of the flesh.
Okay. Shibitsu?
Please skip me.
Okay. Sanda?
Not tending to one's welfare, anatta samhito. This practice does not tend to one's own welfare or well-being in the common popular view, making money and accumulating wealth, establishing a family life with retinues and a circle of friends, in short, striving for success and prosperity in this world appears indeed to be working for one's own welfare. Actually, however, such worldly success and prosperity do not amount to one's own well-being. One's true interest lies in seeking ways of overcoming old age, disease, and death, and attaining release from all forms of suffering. The only way to escape from all forms of suffering is through development of morality, sila, mental concentration, samadhi, and insight, wisdom, panya. Only these, namely sila, samadha, and wisdom, are to be sought for in the true interests of oneself.
Pursuit of sensual pleasures cannot lead to the conquest of old age, disease, death, or all forms of suffering. It only tends to breach of morality codes, such as non-commitment of illegal sexual conduct, seeking worldly amenities through killing, theft, or deceit also amounts to violation of moral precepts. Not to speak of physical actions, mere thought of enjoyment of sensual pleasures prohibits development of mental concentration and wisdom, and thus forms a hindrance to the realization of nibbana, cessation of all sufferings. Observe moral precepts is a sure step to the four nether worlds of intense suffering. It is to be noted, however, that maintenance of moral character alone, without simultaneous development of samadhi and panya, will not lead to nibbana. It only encourages rebirth repeatedly in happier existences, where, however, manifold sufferings such as old age, disease, and death are still encountered again and again. I have a question about this. The devas, do they experience old age, disease, and death? Because I think they're non-physical.
They are physical, but it's just a much more subtle form of physicality. And they do experience old age, sickness, and death, but not to the significant degree that humans experience it. So they'll have sweat coming out of their armpits when they get old. Flowers that they wear wilt. There's flowers, something to do with flowers, like they have flower adornments or garlands that never wilt, but they start to wilt when they get old. That sort of thing. There is old age, sickness, and death, but very, very trivial. There's death, of course, and death is the scary one, because death from a deva realm means potentially being reborn as a human, which is pretty scary for a deva. You can also be reborn in hell. You can go straight from the heavenly realms to the lower realms, I think. Actually not 100% sure.
And I have one more question. The devas, do they have organs like human beings, or are they just light?
They have bodies, physical forms. I assume something like organs. I'm not really sure.
Because
apparently
they
don't have to eat. Yeah, but they don't have to eat, I think. So, and I think they could technically eat forever, like without a limit. Is it correct what I know?
Don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I just read the last two paragraphs. Recluses and bhikkhus, having renounced the world, with the avowed purpose of achieving nibbana, where all sufferings cease, should have nothing to do with the pursuit of sensuous pleasures that only obstruct development of sila, samadhi, and panya. To recapitulate, enjoyment of sensuous pleasures is low, vulgar, being the preoccupation of common people of low intelligence, unclean, ignoble, not practiced by the noble ones. It is detrimental to progress in sila, samadhi, and panya, and thus works against the true interests of those intent on achievement of the unaged, undeceased, the deathless, the nibbana.
Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Sadhu. Bhante, is intelligence or low intelligence here maybe wisdom, low wisdom that's referenced to, or that's being referred to?
It's Burmese. I have no idea what the word is, but yeah, I assume it's probably not intelligence as we think of the word in English. It means, but I mean, the idea is there are people with low mental faculties. It's quite a bit of a. It's quite a sort of looking down. A negative term, sure. But it's a bold statement. I mean, it's a reminder that this is not smart. Certainly not wise. It's neither wise nor smart. It's not smart, meaning that it doesn't lead to your welfare. It doesn't get you what you want. I guess it's not wise for the very same reason. But smart is the idea of that. Right, it's not smart because it doesn't get you happiness. It doesn't do what you think it does. So it's not smart. Not wise because the things that you think it gets you are not worth getting in the first place. So the slight difference between wisdom and intelligence. Intelligence is something that theoretically unwise people can have. So when we talk about intelligence, we might say someone who can get what they want is intelligent. They might not be wise, but they're intelligent. Should they want those things? Not necessarily. An intelligent person can get things they shouldn't want to get. But it's not intelligent because you can't even get the things that you want to get. So sensual pleasure, this pursuit of sensual pleasure doesn't give you more pleasure. It's not the source of sensual pleasure, not in the long term. In the long term, it's a source of great suffering. And then the wisdom side is, even if it could, well, it's not worth wanting those things in the first place. There's no benefit to gaining sensual pleasure at all, even if you could get it. So it's on both levels, both not smart and not wise.
Thank you, Bhante. And also there was a comment before we started today that by Kiki or Chichi that this Dhamma talk was now given 63 years ago, sometime in mid-September. Just a side information.
A timeless message.
So since we've finished with the reading, since we've reached the hour, we will have now time for asking questions and for discussing. topics that we touched upon today. On Discord, please feel free to unmute yourself in the voice channel if you want to say something, and both in Discord and YouTube you can now write your messages, questions in the chat.
Bhante, the first question we have: according to the text, do practitioners of certain schools seeking enlightenment in this lifetime have a wrong view?
It seems like Venerable Yuttadhammo has connection issues. Or maybe I'm having connection issues.
No, he's frozen for me too, Delauer. Let's give him a
Okay.
moment to see what's going on.
Yes. Hello, Bhante. Can you hear us? Testing, testing.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me, Bhante?
Hello.
Hello. Testing, testing.
So we have an issue with the power here. I have power and uninterrupted power, but yeah, it's a technical issue that it just shuts off. We're fixing it, but it should be fixed by next session. So no problems, just a hiccup. Now.
Can you hear us, Bhante?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Bhante, are you ready for the first question?
Ready.
The question is, according to the text, do practitioners of certain schools seeking enlightenment in this lifetime have a wrong view? I think we may have lost Venerable Yuttadhammo's connection again.
Yes.
I don't know what happened there. You hear me?
We hear you, Bhante. Okay.
I think I this sort of that Dita Dhamma Nibbana implies the idea of not having to work for it. But seeking enlightenment in this life involves work. It involves path of practice, of self-development. So it's not what is meant by Dita Dhamma Nibbana. Dita Dhamma Nibbana means you don't have to work for it. It's already here. It's Nibbana right in front of you. Which, I mean, you could technically say that that is the practice, because the practice is not about some future thing. It's about seeing here and now, and Nibbana is here and now. But practically speaking, Nibbana isn't here now. Practically speaking, for most people, it's at the end of a long path, so it is in the future. And so the term is used to describe the Nibbana that you don't have to work for. Just eat, drink, and be merry. That's Nibbana, is what he was getting at.
The next question, Bhante. Is there merit in the idea that practice is itself Nibbana, since practice is the necessary condition and Nibbana is the sure result?
I mean, those two statements are not the same, no? You say it is the result, it's obviously not the practice. You're contradicting yourself. No, if you say practice is itself Nibbana, and then you say it's the necessary condition for Nibbana, those two statements could never be the same. But I mean, this is just, it's really just intellectual. This question doesn't have a lot of practical value.
The next question, Bhante. What is the best technique to get rid of recurring thoughts and images that are very unwholesome, even though I'm not thinking of it intentionally?
Important question. But the truth is that thoughts and images can neither of those can be unwholesome. Neither a thought nor an image can be unwholesome. What is unwholesome is your reaction to thinking or seeing something. Even the thought, I want to kill someone, I want to steal something. The thought itself is not the problem, it's the wanting. That's the problem. That's what's unwholesome. The thought itself is just a thought. And that's important, practically speaking, from a practical perspective. It's important to separate the two out, so that thoughts, you note them as thinking, And the desire or the aversion, you note those as desire or aversion. It's very important that you separate them out. Because that really answers your question. You don't have to get rid of thoughts and images. They're not a problem. The problem is you don't like them, you react to them, or you engage in activities that evoke them. Like you engage in greed and that evokes certain thoughts, or anger evokes certain thoughts or images and that sort of thing. But the thoughts and images are inconsequential. It's only your qualities of mind that are the problem. And this is crucial because this is a question that gets asked often. You start with the premises, wrong premises, that these are a problem, and you think, how can I get rid of the problem? And it's frustrating because you can't, and you notice that you can't, and you experience the inability to get rid of these thoughts, and it just seems hopeless. And you realize, I'm not even giving rise to these things. How could I possibly fix this problem? They're not the problem. And a part of the answer is seeing that you can't control them, because that makes you ask this sort of question and change and broadens your horizon, opens you up to the idea that there must be another way. There must be some other way than trying to get rid of these things, because I just can't. And I'm not even responsible for them. They just arise by themselves. But the good news is that you don't have to. And this is a real difference between mindfulness and every other spiritual or non-spiritual path. Mindfulness is not about changing, fixing, controlling, keeping. It's about facing. You just face the thoughts, you face the images, you even just face the emotions. You don't even try to fix them. You cultivate objectivity by facing things and by seeing them just as they are and acknowledging them just as they are, without judgment, without acceptance or rejection. With investigation, you learn by observing.
Bhante, the next question. In sitting meditation, I had a strong aversion. It was a need to stop. There was no physical pain, so I just continued noting what I could, especially noting aversion, thinking, and scared. It was tough. Is practicing this way correct?
Practice generally is tough, difficult. I've said before, training is meant to be, or by its very nature, difficult. That's what training is. If training were easy, it wouldn't really train you, right? It wouldn't elevate you in any way. Physical training is the same. Physical training is about challenge. Its very nature, it is a challenge, and that's the means by which it trains you. Mental training is the same. Difficult. Don't be worried about that. It will never be right to say this was difficult, therefore there was a problem or something wrong with it. Doesn't mean that everything difficult is beneficial, but certainly is one of the criteria for it to be beneficial. It must be difficult. That's how training works. Challenges you. Right? I mean, it's like picking yourself up, pulling yourself up out of the mud. It's a grueling task. That's what you're doing. You're picking yourself up out of the mud. You're cultivating patience, you're cultivating clarity, purity, objectivity, strength of mind, confidence. There's lots of qualities you're developing there. And you're not feeding these unwholesome emotions. When you note, when you're mindful, You're not feeding the greed, you're not feeding the anger, you're not feeding the delusion. It doesn't mean you're eradicating it immediately. You're not feeding it, you're not encouraging it, agreeing with it.
Bhante, the next question. When meditating, experiences of anger, frustration, and wanting pop up. Although we note them, the moment they enter the mind, do they become an unwholesome mind state? Or, because we just note them without any judgment, are we generating a wholesome mind state as a byproduct?
It's not either or, it's both. They are unwholesome. And by noting them, you're generating a wholesome mind state. So unwholesome is not some boogeyman. Every moment of greed, anger, and delusion is not technically unwholesome. And that means it's going to have a negative result. The result will be suffering. But that doesn't mean it result is being born in hell. That's not what that means. You'll be able to see moment by moment how it has a ripple effect. Greed, anger, delusion are immediately problematic in the mind. And you'll see that there's these moments, each moment has a small negative impact, but each moment of mindfulness has a small positive impact. So it's actually both. It's not that you're immune by noting it. It's that you're learning. You're altering the course of things.
Bhante, as a follow-up to that
But
answer,
you'll still notice the result of the defilement. You'll still notice that it has an effect. But the point is, you can't. The path would never be to prevent the arising, somehow stop it from arising, because that would be control. You stop it from arising through wisdom and through mindfulness and through concentration. So it's an indirect, indirect inhibiting. You inhibit them from arising by being clear of mind, focused.
The next question, Bhante. What is wrong with believing in Buddhist practice only to the extent that modern research and science can confirm it?
It's a bit inefficient and a bit problematic. Inefficient in that if you're going to wait for science to confirm it, you might be, it will inhibit your practice every step of the way. Because you need studies, right? And then you need studies to replicate the results of the earlier studies. You need double-blind studies and this sort of thing. Which are, if you can put that together, that's great. They've been notoriously difficult to put together. How are you going to How are you going to find serious practitioners willing to go through that sort of study? Are you going to get those people in contact with the people studying it? Because that's the other part, is it's problematic because science can't directly investigate these sorts of phenomena. It certainly can't directly investigate the way the mind works. So it could, read brain waves to see the difference between someone who meditates and someone who doesn't. That's one way. But that's still just brain waves. It's hard even to interpret those, what exactly they mean. Brain waves are pretty complicated. And not necessarily entirely correlated to the benefits of meditation. And how would you scientifically approach these things? On the other hand, you could argue that mindfulness practice is a scientific method. It is a scientific investigation, and it is reproducible. Anyone can reproduce the results. So you could look at mindfulness practice as a scientific investigation. But it would be completely rejected by materialist science, because that's the very principle that it stands on, is that you don't trust your own observations. And that's reasonable, that's understandable. It's just that mindfulness should be an exception. Because mindfulness, there is a way, and that is the way of mindfulness, to approach subjective experience objectively. What you have to do is determine the objective building blocks of experience. And that is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking, or it's the physical and mental aspects. One way of describing it is the four satipatthana. It's just another way of talking about the building blocks of experience, which are objective and agreed upon, can easily be agreed upon for scientific purposes. And then you learn about how those things work. You observe them, you record, you could even record how they work together. And this is the practice. The path of purification is this path of learning how physical and the mental work together in ordinary subjective experience. And it's reproducible. It works the same way for everyone, so other people can verify one by one, person by person. Anyone who is doubting or skeptical of the results can themselves look and say, yeah, that's actually how the body and the mind work together through the lens of subjective experience, of individual experience. So when you talk about modern research and science confirming it, it's really barking up the wrong tree, because what you're talking about is material science, which looks at the world from a different perspective. Doesn't look at the world from the perspective of individual experience. It shuns personal experience, saying it is subjective, arbitrary, etc., because for the most part it is. Conceptual side of it. But subjective experience, individual experience, does have objective building blocks to it. It has mechanics that are universal and that can be studied individually through the lens of subjective experience. So yeah, probably a really bad idea to do what you're suggesting for those reasons.
I mean, also, why would you need for everything, or especially for this scientific proof? Look at ancient India and how good they were living. I mean, not only in Buddhist circles, but in general, that they had their philosophies and also science, but not like we know it today. And still, I think they had a very useful way of living.
People back then there was a lot of corruption back then as well. I don't know that it's true that people were living really well in general. I'm not sure how that relates either.
Yeah, okay, maybe I've gone too much off track.
the why of it is for confidence. As I can say this is the way, but somebody else is saying some other way is the way. And why would you listen to me, or why would you listen to anyone? No. How do you know what is the right path? How will you know what is the right path? So the reassurance is made by Buddhism is you can see for yourself. You can look and learn for yourself without having to believe anyone. And that's because it is scientific. It really is. Just it's hard to see that because it clashes with some of the principles of materialist science that claims that it is impossible to, or it not only is impossible, but it eschews, it rejects as a very principle subjective experience. So it prevents the acceptance of it. Doesn't allow for the acceptance of scientific observation of subjective experience. Right? It's very principle. I mean, I didn't talk to any science about these things I'm saying. It's just alarm bells going off. They immediately say that's completely against the fundamental principles of science. It's just that it's not. It's against the fundamental principles of materialist science that have missed this point. There's an interesting thesis by this guy. If you look up the word biocentrism, I don't recommend buying his book, but he wrote a thesis that the book was based on, and the thesis is very much in line with, for the most part, in line with the Buddha's teaching, in line with Buddhist practice, mindfulness practice. I think he might even talk about mindfulness and meditation at some point, but he calls it biocentrism, which essentially is this, that reality is based on individual experience, not impersonal third-person reality. So the idea that there are things out there is the wrong way of looking at reality. So why I bring that up is not all science is against this, or not all science would reject this as a method of investigation. It's not in and of itself, or it's not actually against science. It's just that there are prejudices baked into our ideas of science in modern times.
Bhante, the next question. Can an arhat note fear out of a habit of mind or past karma? Do they note the fear as it arises and ceases in the mind without experiencing fear at all, much like a thought of fear? Or does the mind of an arhat cannot even go there at all? Could this example happen at the third stage of enlightenment?
So are these the best questions? Remember, we have tiers to questions. This is a sort of a theoretical, speculative question. I mean, how practical is this? Remember, our first order of questions are those that are of importance to the person asking, like that they need an answer to for their own practice. Can we focus on those ones? Do we have any
Yes.
of those ones?
Sorry, Bhante. That was placed in the first tier. I'll make a note of that for the team.
Make sure we get to the ones that are important.
Here's the next question, Bhante. My mind is unable to stay focused on what is happening and is always getting distracted. What can I do?
I train. We have simple techniques that allow you to train. And it's important to note that they won't prevent you from getting distracted. You should just ignore the fact that you're still distracted to some extent. Like don't worry about the fact that you're still distracted. Don't pay attention to that. I mean, when you're distracted, you note distracted, and don't worry about the fact that it doesn't seem to change anything. It's a drop in the bucket. And what I mean is focus on these moments, these drops in the bucket. And just like kind of with blinders on. Don't ever let yourself look and say, oh, but I'm still so distracted. No, focus on, I'm distracted, distracted, every time it happens. And that builds patience, it builds focus, but it builds it drop by drop. And it's not about trying to force the mind to focus. It's absolutely not. And that's one of the things you'll learn, because even though I say it, you're still going to try to force the mind to focus. But you'll see that that's impossible. And the more you practice, the quieter your mind will become. It just takes time. It takes time and patience, and it has to happen naturally for itself. It's like a seed that you're planting, and it will grow by itself. It's not about you forcing the thoughts down and preventing them from arising, but you changing the parameters, allowing for mindfulness and peace and clarity to grow. So you need patience, and you have to work. You have to do the work yourself. You should just focus on that work. Don't be discouraged by the fact that you can't focus. Don't identify with it as my mind. It's just thoughts. My mind is just an idea, because the my mind part is, oh, I'm so unfocused. My mind is so unfocused. This isn't even real. Not even the truth. The truth is that moment by moment the thoughts arise. Take that as your focus. When the thoughts arise, note them. They arise again, note them again. That's all there is to it. I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. That might be a good place to start. If you've done that, I generally recommend you do our at-home meditation course. You practice at home, and you can learn the basic fundamentals of how to practice mindfulness meditation. Once you've done that, the next recommendation is you find a way to do an intensive course. We have a center here. It is still to some extent under renovation, meaning we're adding more rooms, but we've got lots of empty rooms that are quite conducive to meditation practice. People are just not coming to meditate. If we have the door open, if you're looking for it, we have the means to allow you to progress after you've done the at-home meditation course.
The next question, Bhante. In sitting meditation, it felt as if my head tilted a lot. It was weird. It was as if I disconnected with the body. I noted confused. It was not going away, so I went back to rising/falling. Can you tell me what this was or what was happening?
So the answer I'm going to give is not terribly satisfying, but it's important. The answer is that what it was impermanent, or impermanence. It was an experience that was impermanent. And why that's important is, well, for two reasons. First of all, to limit your interpretation or your analysis or your meaning making of things. Things are not important beyond the fact that they're impermanent. There's nothing special about that experience. Lots of special experiences will arise that aren't actually special. And part of mindfulness is learning that and appreciating that everything is just arising and ceasing. We limit our investigation of experiences to the very minimum of what we can actually say about them with actual verification. So rather than speculating about causes and why things occur and so on, it's not of any value. The only value is that is impermanent. And impermanence, the other reason why it's important is because impermanence also means chaos, the unpredictable nature of things. Anytime anyone says that was weird, the important lesson to take away from that is that it's a sign of impermanence. It's the nature of reality to be unpredictable. And you're learning that. So it opens your mind and broadens your horizon to what is possible. You've never experienced this before. It often happens. This I haven't experienced, something new happens. Shows you that the nature of experience is unpredictable. And that's the only thing important to learn, and why it's important is because it helps you to let go. All that's important to learn about things is that which brings you closer to letting go, freeing yourself from attachment or clinging or meaning making about things. So if you experience that sort of thing again and again, or things like it, you'll start to get tired of it. You'll lose your enchantment of it. You'll lose the surprise that comes from it. You'll become more familiar with this nature of reality as being unpredictable. And you'll lose your disenchantment with reality and with experience in general. And that's when you're ready to let go. That's when the mind begins to give up its stranglehold on experiences, its obsession with things, reacting to things. Stop reacting. It's not worth it. So seeing strange things is a valuable part of the practice, because it takes away the inclination to expect things to be a certain way, or to expect to be able to rely on the stability of things. Reality is unstable. And appreciating that is a big part of letting go. Part of the path which leads you to let go. So you can note those sorts of things as feeling. Confused is fine. If that's what you experience, that's great. Noting that is good. But in future, before it confuses you, you can just note it as a feeling or an experience. If it's a knowing, an awareness, you can note knowing, you're knowing that it's happening. Those are fine as well.
The next question, Bhante. Outside of formal meditation, is it only through wisdom gained by experience that we learn when the proper time is to note and when we should put our mental activity elsewhere?
Mindfulness is always valuable. Satincha kohang bhikkhave sabatikang vadami. Sabatikang means always valuable. There's no time where you should apply yourself elsewhere. There's only times where you have to apply yourself elsewhere. For work, for worldly pursuits, that sort of thing. But any chance you get, there's no question that you should apply mindfulness whenever you're able. From the perspective of the practice that leads to freedom from suffering. From a worldly perspective, there are other things that need to be accomplished. You have to study, you have to engage in employment, activities that don't lend themselves easily to mindfulness. But from the perspective of practice, from the point of view of mindfulness and the Buddhist teaching, there's no time where it's not useful.
The next question, Bhante. I feel uneasiness every time I finish my practice and come back to the same mundane life. It seems like I am enjoying catching my thoughts in the practice, and coming back to real life makes me sad. How is this possible when I am trying to see reality?
Yeah, well, enjoying means liking. So if there's something you're liking in the practice, that will lead to sadness when you're not practicing. You're learning about the nature of desire, the nature of attachment. It's even possible to like meditation and dislike not meditating, for example. But regardless, the uneasiness is something you should note. It's an object that you can take to apply mindfulness to. When you feel uneasy, you should note that. But likely a cause of some kind of enjoyment. Not that you shouldn't enjoy, it's just that when you do, well, it kind of is that you shouldn't enjoy, but it's just that you shouldn't try to stop the enjoyment. You should just note it. When you like something, you say liking. If you do that, you'll find there's less attachment to things, and as a result, less disappointment when they're not there.
The next question, Bhante. When I meditate for longer, my back pain grows more intense, and it feels more natural to note the pain than rising and falling. How long should I stay with the pain before returning to the breath?
You should try and stay with it until it goes away, but if after a long time it doesn't go away, it can be useful to go back to the rising and falling. There's no magical number or line, no set in stone line, but as a general principle, you should try to note the pain until it goes away, and you should try to separate that pain from, say, the tension in the back, because eventually your mind gets strong enough to see the difference, and you'll be able to notice when the pain goes away, even though there's still tension in the back. But it's that pain that we're looking to note until it goes away. You don't have to note the physical tension in the body until that goes away, just the pain. When the pain is gone, then you can go back to the rising and falling. But you should stay with the pain until it goes away, unless it stays for a long time.
The next question, Bhante. When meditating, I often feel wanting. I note this, but in my day, I often feel I'm missing out on life by not doing worldly things, such as playing games. How do I overcome that want? It won't go.
Well, as we read in the text, even Sotapannas have wanting still. So one thing is, I talked about this I think last week, one thing is Wanting is the hard one. It's the part of the training. I mean, it's just a part of the long training that we undergo through the practice. You can't just turn it off. But we have a clear system to get started working on freeing your mind from being a slave to desire and aversion. So start by reading our booklet, do the at-home course, come here and do an intensive course. This is what we have to offer. How do you overcome it? We have the program. It's up to you how much effort you put into it. But don't expect it to just turn off. I mean, it's not like, okay, once I've done this, I'll practice. What you're talking about is the whole reason for practicing in a long sense that can take many people lifetimes. Like most people lifetimes. But we get started on it. And it's up to you how far you can go in this life.
The next question, Bhante. My mother is a very good and kind person who helps others so much. It's just that she drinks half a glass of wine every day. What could I point out as problematic to her so that she can observe the problem for herself?
Yeah, that's tough. Well, a half a glass of wine every day isn't a huge problem. Technically, it's breaking the 5 precepts, which is a problem. But a half a glass of wine for many people is not going to ruin their lives, not even necessarily ruin their good qualities, their commitment to goodness. It is going to make them lazy and sloppy, but most people aren't concerned with those things. The only real way is for her to begin to practice mindfulness, which requires her to be interested in practicing mindfulness. Because as soon as you practice mindfulness, alcohol just goes out the window. Absolutely, it's not possible to do both. They're completely in opposition. You just can't abide it, one or the other. Practice of mindfulness shows you clearly the problem with alcohol. And to some extent, it's a solution for the problem that alcohol proposes to solve. Right? Alcohol is about taking the edge off. I mean, in those amounts anyway, it's about taking the edge off. So you have stress because things are too sharp. They're too clear. These things that I'm experiencing, they're too clear. I want to blur them a little bit. That will make them, when they're fuzzy, it'll be easier to deal with them, right? It's a horrific thought from a Buddhist perspective, but it's kind of effective. Everything is blurry, you feel okay. Mindfulness allows you to have the clarity, retain that clarity, but free you from the stress that it causes. Allows you to experience things in full clarity without suffering from them. It's far superior. I mean, it's categorically superior to alcohol. I mean, the mechanics, even putting aside the diluted state during the alcohol, the aversion that you cultivate as a result of seeking an avoidance, you have this experience you don't want to face. Alcohol makes it so you don't have to face that experience, the stress and the tension of being too in touch with reality. And every time you take alcohol, from the outset, you're cultivating or feeding this aversion to the clarity of reality. That's not even to talk about the effects of alcohol itself, which are, of course, deleterious. The only way is if they're interested in mindfulness, and I can't say whether that's, I don't have a solution because it's completely up to her whether she's interested in meditation. Of course, it's often aided, not created, but can be aided by your practice. If you practice mindfulness, that's the best thing you can do for everyone around you. Not that that means that for sure they are going to start to practice or become Buddhist, but it's opening the door. You practicing is the best thing you can do for them. Really, your mindfulness is the best thing. It really does change everyone around you as well. I mean, it not completely, but it affects everyone around you in the best way possible.
Ante, the next question. I often note things lazily without actually paying close attention to them. Is this a lack of effort on my part?
So you may be not noting the laziness, the feeling of being lazy or non-committal or lackadaisical. You need to note everything, and sometimes you fail to note something. Could be a feeling of calm. You just feel so calm. It's like, I don't have to be committed to this. I'm just feeling good, calm, and you're not noting that calm. That's often the case with this laziness or complacency or so on. There's also a calm feeling that encourages the laziness. As if it was painful, you wouldn't be so lazy or pleasant. But calm can make you lazy. And pleasant can as well, I suppose. But you don't have to be concerned otherwise. You don't have to be concerned that your noting has a bad quality or something. You don't have to worry about the quality of the noting. That will fix itself. It's just a matter of noting everything, not missing things, not ignoring things. Your attitude and the way you approach experiences is as much a part of experience as the experiences you're approaching. So you approach the experience with a lazy state of mind, you should note that lazy state of mind instead. Whatever the state of mind is, because you can be a little more accurate than just saying lazy. Again, you might feel calm, you might have thoughts, you might have feelings or emotions. There might even be a dullness, a physical dullness that you can note as a feeling. With the close attention, because the Buddha said particularly, nanimita gahi nanubhyanjana gahi. Don't grasp at the signs and particulars. You don't have to pay close attention to things. You just need to see that they're impermanent, suffering, and non-self. That's all you need to know. Impermanent, unsatisfying, and uncontrollable. That's what will allow you to let go.
The next question, Bante. I too suffer from back pain and lower leg symptoms of sciatica during sitting meditation. Should we be changing to walking meditation when the back pain persists?
No. So sitting meditation, you can switch to lying or leaning against the wall if it becomes unbearable. For back pain, sometimes you just have to spend some time leaning. That's fine. There's no shame in sitting against the wall as a kind of a retreat. But what you don't want to do is avoid the pain entirely. So you do want to do your best to face it. As I said before, pleasure or pain, we're not discriminating against either. You take the pleasure at face value, you take the pain at face value. They're both very important things to note and to try and note until they disappear every time they arise. But if it becomes too much, sit against the wall or even lie down if necessary as a temporary solution. Long term, you want to be able to sit and be patient with it, but if and when it gets to be too much, certainly there's no shame in adjusting your posture. But you should continue with the basic exercise, whether it be in sitting or lying. You can still do rising, falling.
Bhante, we've passed our second hour mark, so we will stop our study and Q&A there. We've also answered all the questions in Tier 1. Thank you so much for answering everyone's questions. Your time and wisdom is always so valuable. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you for your help as usual, Subitsu, Julie, Delauer, Sunda. Our Dhamma study group has shrunk. So one thing you didn't mention at the beginning that we should probably mention is that to join the study group, the actual study group, you have to have done the at-home meditation course, which of course severely restricts the number of people who are going to join. But that being said, there's a lot of people missing, which is okay. I don't think it's a big hardship to have few people reading, but it does limit the conversation. Certainly I'm sure there are people interested in joining the conversation and being here in the Dhamma study group. I guess there might also be people who are afraid to join now that it's so very public. But I appreciate you all for joining and appreciate everyone in the audience, both on Discord and YouTube. You don't have to see us on YouTube. You can also join the Discord. You don't have to be in Discord. You can also see us on YouTube. Either one is fine. So I appreciate all of you for coming, for sure. Especially those people who ask good questions. Even if you ask bad questions, that's good too. It's good that you have... there's no real bad questions unless they're mean-spirited. Often the best questions are the bad ones because they allow us to correct misunderstandings. So don't be afraid to ask bad questions. Unless you're bad-spirited. If you're asking them in a bad spirit or with ill intent, then it's a bad question. Otherwise, ask away. We don't discriminate. But again, we're focused on questions that relate to the practice, so it's always especially heartwarming to see people with questions about their practice, people who are clearly struggling with that which we should struggle with, which is the training. You should struggle with it. It should be a struggle. It is a struggle. It's a valiant struggle, a worthwhile struggle. And to see people struggling, hey, I've been there. I know what it's like. I've done these courses. I've done this practice. It's a struggle. I appreciate that, and I'm absolutely committed to doing what I can to help. There's no hardship there for me. I appreciate all the goodness that everyone has performed on this occasion. There's so much goodness that arises from these meetings, far more than you might see at a superficial glance. All of the goodness in every moment of learning about the Dhamma, allowing yourself to be challenged by these concepts which are so foreign to worldly society. Challenge our lifestyles, challenge our activities, challenge our attitudes, make us ask questions that we wouldn't otherwise ask, that make us question ourselves in ways that we would often just take for granted. There's so much goodness just that comes from listening, from taking part. All the power of that goodness, may it truly support you all in your practice and all of us in our practice, that we may find success in facing our experiences and freeing ourselves from greed, anger, and delusion, and finding true peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu. Have a good week, everyone.
Sadhu. Thank you, Bhante.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.